Thanks for joining us. Some sad news to begin tonight's broadcast. Canada has lost one of its most trusted voices. Legendary broadcaster Lloyd Robertson has died, leaving behind an extraordinary legacy after more than 4 decades of delivering the news to Canadians with calm compassion and unwavering professionalism. This is a picture of Lloyd with me back in 2013 when I worked at CTV News. Robertson got his start in broadcasting in 1952 in his hometown of Stratford, Ontario, at a local radio station, before eventually moving to the CBC and then CTV. Former CBC national news anchor Peter Mansbridge says Robertson changed the face of TV news in Canada. He remembers his friend and sometimes rival as a dedicated journalist who ensured news anchors were more than just teleprompter readers.
And then he left for CTV, which was an important milestone in the history of television broadcasting in Canada, because until that time, no matter the network or the station, the anchors were announcers who were hired for their ability to speak eloquently and not necessarily know anything about journalism. Lloyd argued that they should be journalists, and he felt that he had a journalistic background. And so he fought for that, didn't win it at the CBC, but CTV offered him the job with that kind of status, where he could write his own stuff if he wanted to and make his own decisions that way. The CBC wasn't willing to do that, but they realized when they have to come around to deciding who was going to replace him, that they had to do it. And so they did. So it was a triumph for Lloyd in many ways, but it was also a triumph for the television anchor industry.
Lloyd retired as CTV National News chief anchor in 2011, having covered many modern history's defining moments. Robertson was 92. Sharing stories of kindness, compassion, and unity in the face of tragedy. That's the goal of tonight's community vigil for a young autistic boy who went missing in Calgary on July 16th. 11-year-old Parker Wells was found deceased 2 weeks later in a maze of underground pipes. Tonight, with cooperation from the City of Calgary and City Council, a vigil will be held at City Hall Plaza from 7 till 8 p.m. According to a Facebook post by In Memory, Find Parker YYC, it's an opportunity to honor Parker's life and the coming together of thousands of community members who volunteered their time and efforts to help locate the missing child and bring him home to his family. Charred debris, empty foundations, burned out vehicles, and fires that are still smoldering are all that remain along portions of the west side of Okanagan Lake in BC's interior. Canadian press reporter Daryl Greer toured the lakeshore after the chief of the Okanagan Indian Band said 230 homes had been lost on the reserve.
Only a few boats that remained in the water were obviously untouched by the flames, but otherwise, these piles of debris that looked like they were upon foundations that once were homes or cabins or whatever are just complete, like, piles of nothing almost, with, little smoking piles still visible in the remnants from where we were in the water just offshore. It's hard to figure out the scale of the destruction, just the length. And the only kind of anomaly is there was 2 homes still standing, and on both sides of these 2 homes, every other structure in this stretch of lakeshore was gone.
During the trial of a man accused of killing his 9-year-old Montreal daughter, police testified that they had found traces of blood on the jacket the girl was wearing when she died last summer in a rural area of New York State.
A forensic scientist from the New York State Police testified about the discovery on Tuesday during the trial of a man accused of killing his daughter last July. Luciano Fratellin is charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a human corpse in the death of Melina Fratellin, who lived in Montreal. The 46-year-old man has pleaded not guilty to both charges and has been held without bail since his arrest in July 2025. Forensic scientist Kimberly Stoddard told the jury that she tested the items the girl was wearing and found blood in multiple places on the jacket. Stoddard did not specify whose blood was on the jacket.
While on a road trip in New York State in July of last year, Luciano Fratellin contacted emergency services to report that his daughter, Melina, had been abducted by two men in a white van. Police grew suspicious due to shifting timelines in his story. Melina's body was hidden in a marshy, wooded area, and an autopsy determined the 9-year-old died from asphyxia due to drowning, and the incident was ruled a homicide. After months of controversy, the Gordie Howe International Bridge opened to pedestrians and cyclists this morning. A Windsor man camped out for 28 hours to be the first Canadian to cross into the United States on the newly opened 2.5-kilometer path. Officials say lines for the multi-use path are long today, but reassure that the bridge has an estimated 125-year lifespan, and there will be many opportunities to walk or bike across. A joint celebration with the U.S. to mark the bridge's opening was canceled over Washington's recent threat of new tariffs on Canadian goods. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is back in Washington this week, but it's not known how long he'll be there or when he might come home. A government source says LeBlanc arrived in D.C. yesterday morning. His schedule includes meeting with industry groups who'd like to see the CUSMA trade deal renewed, as well as various U.S. senators and members of Canada's trade negotiating team. LeBlanc is being joined by Canada's chief trade negotiator, Janice Charette. Manitoba's opposition says the U.S. decision to close its diplomatic post in Winnipeg is disappointing and underscores Premier Wabkanu's failure to get things done on cross-border trade. PC leader Abi Khan says that despite Canu's government spending nearly $1 million a year on a Washington trade office, it has failed to deliver new investment or trade deals. A spokesperson for Canu's office says the NDP government reopened the U.S. trade office that was closed under the previous PC government and is committed to rebuilding Manitoba's presence in Washington and around the globe. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump's administration informed Congress it will close 5 smaller embassies and consulates, including in Winnipeg, to streamline operations. And while U.S. consulates are closing, our borders are expanding to some degree. The Southeast Alberta Chamber of Commerce, based in Medicine Hat, is welcoming future upgrades to their nearest border crossing in the United States. Canada Border Services Agency has recently begun work into upgrading the Wild Horse Port of Entry, the crossing closest to the U.S. from Medicine Hat. CBSA says that while the crossing will not change their hours, the Canada side of the crossing will see new infrastructure upgrades, including a new main building and bi-level primary inspection booth for passenger and commercial vehicles.
Bilateral trade flows were about $6.9 billion. US dollars. So Canada continues to be one of Montana's most important customers. And so when we consider those trade flows between Alberta and Montana, ensuring that we have access to land ports is extremely important for us. And when you look at the efficient movement of goods, you want to take the most direct, efficient route from point to point. And so ensuring that we have that border facility at least 13 hours, 365 days, as opposed to just those seasonal hours, and then encouraging that transport traffic. We were really pleased when the federal government announced that there would be shovels in the ground this year. It's been something that we've been advocating for a couple of decades now. In my time at the Chamber of 17 years, it's been something that has been part of my portfolio ever since I started. And so being able to actually see a new facility on the Canadian side is certainly welcome relief.
However, service times will not change, with Coutts remaining as the province's sole 24/7 border crossing. CBSA also claims that in the past 2 years, on average, less than 1 truck per day enters Canada from Wild Horse. A survey of 900 Jewish post-secondary students across Canada found that almost all of them reported experiencing anti-Semitism on campus. The federal government commissioned the survey, which heard that Jewish students often hide their identity because they feel targeted or unsafe.
The Campus Anti-Semitism and Student Experiences report draws on responses from 900 Jewish post-secondary students across the country. They answered nearly 40 questions covering issues of campus climate, classroom experiences, threats and violence, online anti-Semitism, institutional responses, mental health, and academic consequences. They also provided several hundred written statements and comments in their own words. The central finding here is very clear. Anti-Semitism on Canadian campuses is neither isolated nor episodic. 95% of the students report experiencing or witnessing at least one form of anti-Semitism in the previous year. It can reasonably be described as systemic.
What does it feel like to question whether it's safe to tell someone that you're Jewish? To walk across campus and wonder whether wearing a Star of David, a Jewish necklace, or a kippah will change the way that people see you. To hear your parents say, maybe don't wear that today, not because they want you to hide who you are, but because they're worried of you making it home. I have spoken with countless Jewish students who hesitate before wearing a Jewish symbol, attending a Hillel or Chabad event, or simply telling other classmates that they're Jewish. Not because they're ashamed, but because they're afraid. No student should have to calculate whether being honest about who they are will make them a target. Universities should challenge our ideas, not our right to exist. My hope is simple, that no student has to hide a necklace, avoid a conversation, or stay silent about their identity just to make it through their school day. Every student deserves to feel safe. Every student deserves to belong, and every student deserves to know that they never have to choose between their education and their identity.
In local news, the Southern Alberta Art Gallery, or SAG, is set for a major transformation that will see food services and a parkside patio. The more than $7.7 million enhancement and expansion project, largely funded through federal and provincial grants, was officially launched during today's groundbreaking ceremony. Officials say the project will include a parkside entrance and patio opening onto Galt Gardens, a food services area, an outdoor gathering and public art space, and a mixed-use workshop for exhibitors, programs, and events.
When groups come looking for funding for their organizations or for their groups, we try to ask, is there other ways that they can find matching funds and try to leverage some of those dollars? And SEG has done exactly that. We want to have a balance in the community. There's those that support sport more than art, and those that are art more than sport, but there's no reason why we can't have them all, and so that we can benefit the whole community.
It's about spending time in our civic spaces. It's about enjoying our downtown amenities. So I'm really looking forward to a variety of new ways that folks can access and spend time in the gallery. I'm also really looking forward to some greater connection to Galt Gardens and the outdoors. We have a new parkside entrance, and this is going to be a critical piece of the infrastructure to connect Galt Gardens, the gallery, Festival Square, downtown businesses and amenities, and ensure that we're not blocking access to this important downtown green space.
SAG will reopen its modernized building in spring of 2028. During the renovation, SAG will operate in 3 spaces at 3 separate addresses, and you can check out the location of those spaces on our website. Coaldale is getting ready for one of its biggest celebrations of the year. Summerfest returns on August 6th with 4 days of music, food, family fun, and a theme that pays tribute to the community's past while looking forward to its future. Clayton Vargas, the Community Experience Manager for the town of Coaldale, explains what features the event will bring for the whole community.
We've got our candy parade as per usual on the Saturday. We're actually kicking things off a little bit earlier this year. So on Thursday, Country Kitchen Catering, which is actually based out of the town office building here, they're going to be doing a bit of a barbecue thing in conjunction with the farmers market that we've had going on. Looking back, reflecting on the past and looking what makes Coaldale great, what has got us to this point, and looking into the future as to what's ahead for Coaldale.
I think we've raised close to around $50,000 thanks to our sponsors. So that has been going, it's helped a lot. If you do want to be part of the parade, you could apply online or you could just show up day of and fill out the registration form. All the information will be on the Coaldale Summerfest website. So if you were to do day of, just look at the website under the parade tab and you could show up there.
Summerfest will conclude on Sunday, August 9th with Cowboy Church at 3 p.m. in the Civic Square atrium. The non-denominational service will include music, cowboy poetry, reflections, and refreshments. Scientists say they are certain that a SpaceX rocket has slammed into the moon as predicted. The 5,400 mile per hour crash has yet to be officially confirmed, but space tracking experts say it's inevitable that the leftover rocket segment plowed into the moon on Wednesday after drifting off course for the past year.
There's no doubt in my mind that much loved January 2025 Falcon 9 upper stage that we've been tracking all these months is now in teeny little pieces scattered over the surface of the moon near Einstein crater. The Falcon 9 rocket had done its job within a few hours of launch. Back in January 2025, batteries ran out. It's been a dead hunk of 4 tons of metal ever since, just orbiting under gravity. I would imagine that the U.S. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which is a huge spy camera in low orbit around the moon, will eventually spot a mark on the moon where the rocket hit. And so if you want visual confirmation that it really did hit, then yes, we'll have to wait for something like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to send us pictures.
Just what the moon needs, a new crater.
The Canadian agriculture community and the province of Saskatchewan are mourning a profound loss following the sudden passing of Saskatchewan farmer and Canadian Senator Todd Lewis over the weekend. Todd was a giant in farm advocacy and a well-respected, instantly recognizable leader across prairie agriculture. Farming near Gray, Saskatchewan, south of Regina, his career in public service spanned decades, serving as president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, vice president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and a longtime municipal councillor before his appointment to the Senate in 2025. Prime Minister Mark Carney noted in a tribute that Senator Lewis carried a deep conviction that farming is a responsibility to the land, to one's neighbors, and to future generations. Todd was a steady, trusted voice for rural Canada, a strong advocate for producers, and a genuine friend to many of us here in the farm media. On behalf of everybody at realagriculture.com, our deepest condolences go out to his family, friends, and the entire agricultural community. For Bridge City News, I'm Sean Haney with realagriculture.com.
Air travel tensions are cooling off after WestJet said it has returned to normal operations as it continues to rebook travelers whose flights were canceled due to a work stoppage over the long weekend. Around 4,400 flight attendants walked off the job early Sunday morning, but a tentative deal was reached the following day. Data from aviation analytics company Cirium showed no WestJet flights have been canceled Wednesday after more than 900 were grounded between Saturday and Tuesday. WestJet has extended the deadline to tomorrow for customers to make a one-time change to their itineraries or cancel their flights with no fees. Most Canadian travelers don't know that Ottawa's travel advisories can void their travel insurance and aren't sure how embassies abroad can help them. A survey commissioned by Global Affairs Canada found just 28% of respondents knew changes to the risk level Ottawa gives to countries in travel alerts can change the validity of travel insurance. Some Canadians wrongly believe embassies can help them find jobs abroad or pay to send a dead relative's body home, while others aren't aware the government can lend money to Canadian travelers for evacuations. The report also found Canadians are receptive to travel advice, but few check Ottawa's travel alerts or register for voluntary updates before traveling. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 344 to 36,146. The Dow was up 263 to 54,349. The S&P 500 was down 12 to 7,723, and the Nasdaq was down 221 to 26,363. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 71 cents to 75.06 US per barrel. Natural gas was down a cent to 2.67 US. Gold was up 168.85 to 42.4671 US an ounce, and silver was up 2.52 to 62.03 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.89 per bushel, barley is at $5.97, canola is at $17.42, and corn is at $7.60 per bushel. Live cattle were up 222 to 234.17. Feeder cattle were up 212 to 353.32. Lean hogs were down 125 to 96.60. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 71.40 US.
Recapping one of today's top stories, a massive wildfire has destroyed structures and homes on about 120 properties. The Pear Lake wildfire is also responsible for the evacuation of areas in and around Clinton, BC, late last month. The BC Wildfire Service says the fire has grown to about 1,200 square kilometers and was quickly burning to the south and west. Another fire near Okanagan Lake burned down about 230 homes over the weekend. The BC Wildfire Service is also reporting that a helicopter has crashed into a lake near 70 Mile House while fighting the fires. The pilot was the only person on board the chopper and was taken to hospital with minor injuries. Anti-Semitism in Canada has become an increasingly prominent concern, with Jewish communities reporting a rise in hate incidents, including vandalism, harassment, threats, and violence. Up next, I interview the CEO of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Catch Noah Shack in that interview coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our content and poll questions.